The Stanley Hotel stood majestically against the backdrop of the Rocky Mountains, its Georgian colonial architecture a testament to early 20th century grandeur that had made it one of Colorado's most prestigious destinations for over 8 decades. On the crisp October morning of October 15th, 1998, the historic hotel in Estes Park was preparing to welcome newlyweds from across the country who sought the perfect romantic getaway in the shadow of the Continental Divide. Among these guests were David and Sarah Mitchell, a young couple from Denver who had chosen the Stanley Hotel for their honeymoon specifically because of its reputation for luxury, its stunning mountain views, and its rich history that promised to make their first week as husband and wife truly unforgettable. David Mitchell, 26 years old, worked as a software engineer for a rapidly growing tech company in downtown Denver. He had graduated from the University of Colorado with a degree in computer science in 1994, just as the internet was beginning to transform American business and society. David was known among his colleagues as meticulous, reliable, and deeply thoughtful, qualities that had made him successful professionally and had attracted Sarah to him when they met at a friend's barbecue 3 years earlier. Sarah Patterson Mitchell, 24, was a high school English teacher at George Washington High School in northwest Denver. She had completed her education degree at Colorado State University and had spent 2 years building a reputation as one of the most dedicated and innovative teachers in her district. Her students loved her creative approach to literature, and her colleagues respected her commitment to making classic works accessible and relevant to teenagers growing up in the late 1990s. The couple had met in August 1995, introduced by mutual friends who thought David's quiet intelligence would complement Sarah's outgoing warmth. Their relationship had developed gradually but steadily. Casual group outings evolved into one-on-one dates, which grew into a deep friendship that blossomed into love over the course of 18 months. David proposed to Sarah on Valentine's Day, 1998, during a weekend camping trip in Rocky Mountain National Park. He had planned the proposal for months, waiting for the perfect moment when they were alone among the snow-covered peaks that both of them loved. Sarah's yes was immediate and enthusiastic, followed by tears of joy and hours of excited planning about their future together. Their wedding on October 10, 1998, had been a modest but beautiful ceremony held at the historic Trinity United Methodist Church in downtown Denver, followed by a reception at the Denver Art Museum. 120 guests, family members, college friends, work colleagues, and neighbors celebrated with the couple as they exchanged vows that emphasized their shared values of loyalty, adventure, and commitment to building a life together based on mutual respect and support. The 5-day honeymoon at the Stanley Hotel represented a significant splurge for the young couple. David's salary as a software engineer was comfortable but not extravagant, and Sarah's teaching income, while rewarding personally, was modest by 1998 standards. Together, they had saved for 8 months to afford the luxury accommodation and the special experiences they had planned for their first week as husband and wife. They had booked the presidential suite, room 217, specifically because of its historical significance and romantic ambience. The room was famously luxurious, featuring a 4-poster king bed, a sitting area with antique furniture, a working fireplace, and panoramic views of the Rocky Mountains that were particularly spectacular during the autumn foliage season. The Stanley Hotel had assured them that room 217 would provide the perfect setting for their honeymoon: privacy, comfort, and an atmosphere of timeless elegance that would make their first days as a married couple truly special. David and Sarah arrived at the Stanley Hotel on the afternoon of October 15th, driving David's 1995 Honda Civic that was packed with luggage for their 5-day stay. They had planned their honeymoon activities carefully, hiking in Rocky Mountain National Park, romantic dinners at the hotel's renowned restaurant, couples' spa treatments, and quiet evenings by the fireplace in their suite. The hotel's front desk manager, Mrs. Dorothy Henley, personally welcomed the newlyweds when they checked in at 3:30 p.m. Mrs. Henley had worked at the Stanley Hotel for 16 years and took particular pride in ensuring that honeymoon couples received exceptional service that would create lasting memories. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell," she said with genuine warmth, "welcome to the Stanley Hotel. We're delighted to have you here for your honeymoon. Room 217 has been prepared especially for you, and I want to assure you that our entire staff is committed to making your stay absolutely perfect." Mrs. Henley personally escorted the couple to their suite, explaining the hotel's amenities and pointing out historical details that made the Stanley Hotel unique among American luxury destinations. She showed them how to operate the antique fireplace, explained the room service options, and provided them with a detailed guide to romantic activities available both within the hotel and in the surrounding Estes Park area. "If you need anything at all," Mrs. Henley concluded as she handed David the ornate brass key to room 217, "please don't hesitate to call the front desk. We want your honeymoon to be absolutely magical." David and Sarah spent their first evening at the hotel exactly as they had envisioned. They unpacked their luggage, arranged Sarah's collection of honeymoon lingerie in the antique dresser, and set up David's camera equipment to document their romantic getaway. David was an amateur photographer who had brought professional quality equipment to capture both the mountain scenery and intimate moments with his new wife. They enjoyed a candlelit dinner at the hotel's main restaurant, where they shared stories about their wedding day, discussed their excitement about their upcoming move to a larger apartment, and made plans for the adventures they wanted to share during their first year of marriage. Other guests at the restaurant later described them as a clearly devoted couple who seemed completely absorbed in each other's company. After dinner, they returned to room 217, where David started a fire in the fireplace, while Sarah changed into one of the special nightgowns she had purchased for their honeymoon. They spent hours talking by the fire, drinking champagne that the hotel had provided as a wedding gift, and planning the activities they wanted to enjoy during the remaining 4 days of their stay. David wrote in the travel journal that Sarah had given him as a wedding present, "October 15th, 1998, our first day as husband and wife in this incredible place. Sarah looks beautiful in the firelight. I can't believe how lucky I am to be married to my best friend. Tomorrow we're going to hike to Emerald Lake and then have dinner at that little restaurant in town. I want to remember every moment of this week," Sarah wrote in her own diary. "David is being so sweet and romantic. He keeps telling me how happy he is that we're married, and I keep thinking about how perfect our life is going to be. This hotel is like something from a fairy tale. I feel like the luckiest woman in the world." The second day of their honeymoon, October 16th, proceeded exactly according to their carefully planned itinerary. They woke early, enjoyed breakfast in bed delivered by room service, and spent the morning hiking to Emerald Lake in Rocky Mountain National Park. David photographed Sarah among the golden aspen trees, and Sarah collected colorful leaves that she planned to preserve as mementos of their honeymoon. They returned to the hotel in the afternoon, exhausted but exhilarated from their mountain adventure. Sarah took a long bath in the suite's antique clawfoot bathtub, while David organized the photographs he had taken and wrote detailed entries in his travel journal about their hiking experience. That evening, they drove into Estes Park for dinner at a small Italian restaurant that Mrs. Henley had recommended. Other diners later recalled seeing a young couple who appeared deeply in love, holding hands across the table and laughing frequently during their meal. The restaurant's owner, Giuseppe Castellano, remembered them specifically because David had asked him to take a photograph of the couple with David's camera. explaining that they were on their honeymoon and wanted to document every special moment. They returned to the Stanley Hotel around 9:30 p.m. and went directly to room 217. The night desk clerk, James Morrison, distinctly remembered seeing them enter the elevator together, carrying what appeared to be leftovers from their dinner and a bottle of wine they had purchased in town. "They seemed like such a happy couple," Morrison later told investigators, "always holding hands, always smiling at each other. You could tell they were really in love." October 17th marked the beginning of what would become one of Colorado's most baffling missing persons cases. David and Sarah had made reservations for breakfast in the hotel restaurant at 8 a.m., followed by a couple's massage appointment at the hotel spa at 10:30 a.m. When they failed to appear for breakfast, the restaurant staff assumed they had decided to sleep late and were enjoying a leisurely morning in their suite. But when they missed their spa appointment, which they had paid for in advance and were particularly excited about, Mrs. Henley became concerned. "It wasn't like them," she later explained to police. "They had been very punctual for every other appointment and activity." Mrs. Mitchell had specifically mentioned how much she was looking forward to the couple's massage. For them to simply not show up without calling seemed completely out of character. Mrs. Henley personally went to room 217 at 11:15 a.m. to check on the couple. She knocked gently on the door, calling out, "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, this is Dorothy from the front desk. We wanted to make sure you're all right." No response. She knocked more firmly and called again, but heard no movement from inside the room. Concerned that the couple might be ill or have experienced some kind of emergency, Mrs. Henley returned to the front desk and called room 217's telephone. The phone rang multiple times, but was not answered. At 12:30 p.m., Mrs. Henley made the decision to enter the room using her master key, accompanied by the hotel's head of security, Robert Walsh. Hotel policy required that any entry into a guest room without explicit permission be witnessed by at least 2 staff members and be conducted only in cases of suspected emergency. What they found in room 217 was completely perplexing. The room was empty. David and Sarah Mitchell were nowhere to be found, but everything else appeared exactly as it should have been if the couple were simply out for a brief excursion. The bed was made but showed signs of having been slept in. David's camera equipment was neatly arranged on the antique writing desk. Sarah's toiletries were organized in the bathroom, and her clothes were hanging properly in the closet. More puzzling, the couple's luggage was still in the room, packed as if they were planning to stay for the remaining 2 days of their reservation. Their wallets, containing cash and credit cards, were on the nightstand beside the bed. David's car keys were in the pocket of the jacket hanging in the closet. "It was like they had just stepped out for a moment," Mrs. Henley later told police. "Everything was neat and organized, as if they were planning to return at any minute." But there were details that immediately struck both Mrs. Henley and Security Chief Walsh as unusual. The room was secured from the inside. The main door was not only locked but had the security chain engaged. The windows, which opened onto a second-floor balcony, were locked from the interior with their original brass hardware. There was no evidence that anyone had attempted to open, force, or tamper with any of the room's entry points. If David and Sarah Mitchell had left room 217, they had done so in a manner that left no trace of their exit. Mrs. Henley immediately contacted the Estes Park Police Department, reporting that 2 hotel guests had vanished under circumstances that defied logical explanation. Within an hour, Detective Captain Michael Torres and Detective Sarah Chen had arrived at the Stanley Hotel to begin what would become one of the most extensive missing persons investigations in Colorado history. Detective Torres was a 20-year veteran of law enforcement who had handled hundreds of missing persons cases throughout his career. He had seen people disappear for countless reasons: voluntary departure to escape personal problems, accidents in wilderness areas, domestic violence situations, and occasionally criminal abduction. But he had never encountered a case where people had vanished from a locked room with no apparent means of exit. In 30 years of police work, Detective Torres later wrote in his case files, "I had never seen anything like Room 217. Two people had simply ceased to exist in a space that was physically impossible to leave without unlocking from the inside." The initial police investigation was exhaustive and methodical. Every surface in Room 217 was dusted for fingerprints. Every item was photographed, catalogued, and examined for evidence of struggle, violence, or unusual activity. The hotel's staff was interviewed extensively about their interactions with the missing couple and their observations of anyone else who might have been in the vicinity of Room 217. The room itself was treated as a potential crime scene. Though investigators could find no evidence of criminal activity, there were no signs of struggle, no blood, no indication that anything violent or coercive had occurred. The couple's possessions were undisturbed, their money was untouched, and their personal items were arranged exactly as loving newlyweds might be expected to leave them during a romantic getaway. Detective Chen, who specialized in cases involving missing women and domestic violence, paid particular attention to any indicators that Sarah might have been trying to escape an abusive situation or send distress signals to hotel staff. She found no evidence of marital problems, fear, or coercion. Everything in the room suggested a couple who were genuinely happy and looking forward to continuing their honeymoon, Detective Chen reported. Mrs. Mitchell's diary entries, which the family gave us permission to read, described the trip as perfect and magical. There was no indication of any problems in the marriage or any reason why either spouse would want to disappear. The investigation expanded beyond Room 217 to encompass the entire Stanley Hotel property and the surrounding Estes Park area. Search teams combed every public area of the hotel: restaurants, lounges, service corridors, storage areas, and basement facilities. No trace of David and Sarah was found. Search and rescue teams from Larimer County expanded the investigation to include Rocky Mountain National Park and the wilderness areas surrounding Estes Park. Helicopters equipped with heat-sensing technology flew grid patterns over hundreds of square miles of mountain terrain. Ground teams with search dogs explored hiking trails, canyon areas, and remote locations where the couple might have encountered accidents or become lost. The searches continued for 6 weeks, but produced no evidence of the missing newlyweds. David's Honda Civic was found in the Stanley Hotel parking lot, exactly where he had parked it on October 15th. The car was unlocked, and investigators found nothing unusual inside. Road maps for their planned scenic drives, snacks for hiking trips, and a camera bag containing extra film for David's photography. The couple's families arrived from Denver within hours of the initial police report. David's parents, Robert and Linda Mitchell, were devastated and completely bewildered by their son's disappearance. Robert Mitchell was a retired engineer who had taught David the methodical, logical approach to problem solving that had made him successful in his career. David never did anything impulsive or reckless, Robert told investigators. He planned everything carefully. He would never have left their room without taking his wallet, keys, and camera. Something terrible must have happened to them. Sarah's parents, Dr. James Patterson and Margaret Patterson, were equally distraught and confused. Dr. Patterson was a family physician who had known David since Sarah first brought him home to meet the family. He described David as one of the most responsible young men I've ever known, and insisted that neither David nor Sarah would have voluntarily disappeared without contacting their families. They were planning their entire future together, Margaret Patterson told police through tears. Sarah had already started talking about the children they wanted to have and the house they wanted to buy. She would never have just vanished. Someone took them, or something terrible happened to them. Both families offered substantial rewards for information leading to the discovery of David and Sarah. Local media coverage of the case was extensive, and the story of the vanishing newlyweds captured national attention when it was featured on several television programs dedicated to unsolved mysteries. Tips and reported sightings came in from across Colorado and neighboring states. Each lead was carefully investigated, but none produced credible evidence about what had happened to the young couple. As winter settled over the Rocky Mountains, the active search for David and Sarah Mitchell was reluctantly suspended. The case remained open, and Detective Torres continued to follow up on occasional tips and new leads, but no significant progress was made. Room 217 at the Stanley Hotel was sealed by police as a potential crime scene and remained unoccupied for several months. When the investigation was finally concluded without resolution, the hotel management decided to leave the room vacant indefinitely out of respect for the missing couple and their families. "It just didn't feel right to rent that room to other guests," Mrs. Henley explained years later. "What happened to Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell was so tragic and so mysterious. Somehow it seemed appropriate to preserve their room as it was, in case we ever found answers." The years passed, and gradually the case of the vanishing newlyweds became part of Stanley Hotel folklore. Staff members would occasionally tell guests about the mysterious disappearance, usually in the context of the hotel's reputation for supernatural occurrences and unexplained phenomena. But the room itself remained sealed and undisturbed, exactly as David and Sarah Mitchell had left it on the morning of October 17, 1998. The families never stopped hoping for answers. Every year, on the anniversary of the disappearance, Robert and Linda Mitchell, along with Dr. and Mrs. Patterson, would return to Estes Park to meet with police and to visit the Stanley Hotel. They would sit in the lobby where their children had last been seen, holding on to the possibility that someday, somehow, they would learn what had happened to David and Sarah. As the years turned into decades, Detective Torres retired, and the case was passed to younger investigators who reviewed the files periodically, but had no new leads to pursue. The original evidence was preserved in climate-controlled storage, and the case remained officially open, but no one expected it would ever be solved. Room 217 remained empty and locked, a monument to one of Colorado's most baffling unsolved mysteries. But 26 years after David and Sarah Mitchell had vanished on their honeymoon, the room would finally reveal its secrets in a manner that no one could have anticipated, and that would prove even more mysterious than the original disappearance. October 17, 2024, marked exactly 26 years since David and Sarah Mitchell had vanished from room 217 at the Stanley Hotel. What should have been just another autumn day in Estes Park became the day that one of Colorado's most enduring mysteries would finally begin to unravel in the most unexpected and disturbing way possible. The Stanley Hotel had undergone significant changes during the decades since the honeymoon disappearance. New management had taken over in 2010, bringing modern amenities and updated services while carefully preserving the historic character that made the hotel a premier destination for tourists seeking both luxury and authenticity in the Rocky Mountains. The new management team, led by General Manager Victoria Walsh, had inherited both the hotel's prestigious reputation and its most famous unsolved mystery. Victoria, a hospitality industry veteran with 25 years of experience managing luxury properties, had made the pragmatic decision to finally address the situation of room 217. "We can't keep a premium suite empty forever," Victoria had explained to her board of directors during a strategic planning meeting in early 2024. "It's been 26 years. The families have moved on, the original investigators have retired, and frankly, we need the revenue that room could generate. It's time to renovate 217 and return it to active service. The decision hadn't been made lightly. Victoria had personally met with surviving family members of David and Sarah Mitchell to discuss the hotel's plans and to ensure that they were comfortable with room 217 being returned to operation. Robert Mitchell, now 81 years old, and Dr. James Patterson, now 78, had both given their reluctant but understanding consent. "We appreciate that you've kept the room as it was for all these years," Robert Mitchell had told Victoria during a phone conversation in March 2024. "But you're right that it's time to move forward. David and Sarah would have wanted the room to bring happiness to other couples, not to remain a shrine to their disappearance." The renovation of room 217 was scheduled to begin on October 15, 2024, the anniversary of David and Sarah's arrival at the hotel 26 years earlier. Victoria had chosen the date deliberately, viewing it as a symbolic transition from mystery to renewal. The renovation team was led by Marcus Rodriguez, a restoration specialist who had worked on historic properties throughout Colorado and who understood the unique challenges of modernizing antique hotel rooms while preserving their original character and charm. Marcus arrived at the Stanley Hotel on the morning of October 15th, with a crew of 6 skilled craftsmen, an electrician, a plumber, 2 carpenters, a painter, and a specialist in antique furniture restoration. They had been briefed about the room's unusual history and had been instructed to treat the space with appropriate respect while conducting their work. Victoria Walsh personally accompanied the renovation team to room 217 for the ceremonial unlocking that would end the room's 26-year isolation. "Gentlemen," she said, as they stood outside the ornate door that had remained sealed since 1998, "you're about to enter a piece of Colorado history. Please be respectful of what you find inside, and if you encounter anything unusual or potentially significant, stop work immediately and notify me." Victoria inserted the master key into the lock and turned it slowly. The mechanism resisted initially. 26 years of disuse had stiffened the brass components, but finally clicked open. She then reached for the security chain that had been engaged since October 17, 1998. The chain was still in place, exactly as Mrs. Dorothy Henley and Security Chief Robert Walsh had found it during the original investigation. Victoria carefully disengaged the chain and pushed open the door to room 217. What the renovation team found inside defied every expectation and challenged everything they thought they understood about the passage of time. The room was exactly as David and Sarah Mitchell had left it 26 years earlier, but preserved in a condition that seemed impossible given the decades of abandonment. The air inside was fresh and clean, with no trace of the mustiness or staleness that would be expected in a sealed space after more than 2 decades. The temperature was comfortable, approximately 72 degrees Fahrenheit, despite the fact that the room's heating system had been disconnected in 1999. The furnishings appeared pristine, as if they had been maintained and cleaned regularly throughout the intervening years. The antique 4-poster bed was made perfectly, with hospital corners on the sheets and decorative pillows arranged precisely as housekeeping would have left them. The mahogany furniture gleamed with a deep polish that showed no signs of dust or deterioration. Marcus Rodriguez was the first to voice what everyone in the group was thinking. "This isn't possible. This room should be thick with dust, the air should be stale, and the furnishings should show serious signs of age and neglect." "It looks like housekeeping was here yesterday." Victoria walked carefully through the room, documenting everything with her smartphone camera. The couple's belongings were still arranged exactly as the police had photographed them in 1998. David's camera equipment on the writing desk, Sarah's toiletries in the bathroom, their clothes hanging in the closet. But it was the discovery on the nightstand that made Victoria immediately call for the renovation to stop and for police to be contacted. Next to the telephone sat David's travel journal, open to an entry that had not been there during the original investigation. The handwriting was unmistakably David's. The same careful script that police had analyzed in 1998. But the date was impossible. October 17th, 2024, 26 years. Sarah and I have been waiting for someone to find us. We're still here, but not in the way anyone would expect. The room has kept us safe, but we can't leave. Something happened to us that night, something that changed everything. We need help, but we don't know how to ask for it. If someone reads this, please understand that we never wanted to cause so much pain for our families. We love them, and we miss the world we left behind. Victoria read the entry 3 times before the full implication hit her. According to the date, this journal entry had been written that very morning, October 17th, 2024, by a man who had disappeared 26 years earlier. "Everyone out of the room," Victoria ordered immediately. "Nobody touch anything else. I'm calling the police right now." Within 30 minutes, the Estes Park Police Department had dispatched Detective Lieutenant Amanda Foster and crime scene investigator Jake Morrison to the Stanley Hotel. Detective Foster was a 15-year veteran who had reviewed the Mitchell case files multiple times during her career, but had never expected to encounter new evidence after more than 2 decades. Detective Foster's first action was to secure Room 217 as an active crime scene and to document everything with high-resolution photography before any evidence could be disturbed. She photographed the journal entry, the preserved condition of the room, and the inexplicable arrangement of belongings that looked as if they had been maintained throughout the 26 years. Crime scene investigator Morrison brought state-of-the-art forensic equipment that hadn't been available during the original 1998 investigation. He used advanced fingerprint detection techniques, DNA sampling methods, and trace evidence collection procedures to analyze every surface in the room. Detective Foster, Morrison reported after his initial examination, "This scene is unlike anything I've encountered in 20 years of forensic work. There are fresh fingerprints on surfaces throughout the room, recent prints that match the ones we have on file for David and Sarah Mitchell from the original investigation." "How recent?" Foster asked. "Based on the clarity and the absence of degradation, I'd estimate these prints were left within the last 24 to 48 hours. Detective Foster stared at the impossibility of Morrison's findings. "You're telling me that 2 people who disappeared in 1998 left fresh fingerprints in this room this week? That's exactly what the evidence indicates. Moreover, there are no other fingerprints from any third parties, no signs of forced entry, and no indication that anyone else has been in this room since the original investigation." The investigation expanded rapidly as word of the discovery spread through law enforcement channels. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation sent specialists in cold case analysis and forensic science. The FBI assigned agents experienced in unusual disappearances and unexplained phenomena. Dr. Rebecca Chen, a forensic anthropologist from the University of Colorado, was brought in to analyze any potential human remains or biological evidence. Dr. Marcus Thompson, a physicist specializing in temporal anomalies, was consulted about the possibility of natural phenomena that could explain the room's impossible preservation. But it was the discovery made by FBI agent Sarah Williams that transformed the investigation from puzzling to genuinely disturbing. Agent Williams had been examining David's camera equipment, hoping to find exposed film that might provide clues about the couple's final hours. Using techniques developed for recovering data from damaged electronic devices, she discovered that the camera contained images that had been taken long after October 17, 1998. The photographs showed David and Sarah in room 217, but they appeared to age slowly over the years. The earliest post-disappearance images, based on the camera's internal dating system, were from 1999. They showed the couple looking exactly as they had during their honeymoon, but with expressions of confusion and growing fear. Images from 2005 showed subtle changes. David's hair was slightly longer, Sarah appeared thinner, and both looked tired and stressed. Photographs from 2010 showed more significant aging, grey streaks in David's hair, lines around Sarah's eyes, and a haunted quality in their expressions that suggested years of isolation and confusion. The most recent images, dated just weeks before the renovation team's discovery, showed David and Sarah as middle-aged versions of themselves, aged appropriately for people who had lived through 26 years, but somehow trapped in the same room where they had disappeared as newlyweds. These photographs suggest that David and Sarah Mitchell have been aging normally over the past 26 years, Agent Williams reported to the investigation team. But they've been doing so while confined to room 217, apparently unable to leave or to communicate with the outside world until now. Dr. Thompson, the temporal physics specialist, was brought in to examine the room itself for any natural phenomena that could explain what appeared to be a violation of the basic laws of space and time. What we're dealing with here challenges our fundamental understanding of reality, Dr. Thompson explained after 3 days of testing with equipment borrowed from the National Institute of Standards and Technology. The room exhibits properties that shouldn't be possible under normal physical laws. Dr. Thompson's tests revealed several impossible characteristics of room 217. The room's interior existed in a slightly different temporal flow than the surrounding hotel. Atomic clocks placed inside the room ran approximately 0.3% slower than identical clocks in the hallway outside. The air inside the room was somehow self-renewing, maintaining perfect oxygen levels and humidity without any connection to the hotel's HVAC system. The electromagnetic signatures inside the room were unlike anything measured in normal environments, suggesting the presence of energy fields that couldn't be explained by conventional physics. It's as if room 217 has become isolated from normal space-time, Dr. Thompson concluded. The occupants are experiencing time differently than the rest of us, which would explain how they could survive for 26 years without aging at the normal rate or requiring normal sustenance. But the most disturbing discovery came when investigators realized that the phenomena weren't limited to preserving David and Sarah. The room was apparently allowing them to observe and interact with the outside world in ways that defied explanation. Hidden among Sarah's belongings, investigators found a diary that contained entries spanning the entire 26 years since the disappearance. The entries described their growing awareness of their situation, their attempts to escape, and their observations of the changing world outside their temporal prison. Sarah's diary revealed that she and David had been conscious and aware throughout the entire period of their disappearance. They could somehow observe events in the hotel and in the outside world, but they couldn't make themselves seen or heard until the moment the renovation team opened their door. January 1st, 2000. David and I watched the Y2K celebrations on television somehow, though we don't understand how we can see outside our room. We've been trying to understand what happened to us. We remember going to sleep on October 16th, and when we woke up, something was different. We can't leave the room, but we're not exactly trapped either. It's like we exist in a different version of reality. September 11th, 2001. We watched the towers fall. We tried to scream, to break the windows, to do anything to let people know we were here and that we needed to help somehow, but no one can see or hear us. We're ghosts in our own lives. October 17th, 2010, 12 years. We've tried everything we can think of to escape or to communicate with our families. We age, but slowly. We don't need food or water in the normal way, but we feel hunger and thirst that are somehow satisfied by the room itself. David thinks we might be caught between dimensions, or that the room exists in a pocket of space-time that's disconnected from normal reality. March 15th, 2020, the world stopped because of a pandemic. We watched through whatever window we have into reality as the hotel closed and reopened. We're middle-aged now, but trapped in the bodies and situation of our 26-year-old selves. I miss my parents. I miss teaching. I miss being alive in the normal way. October 15th, 2024. Someone is coming to our room today. We can sense it somehow. After 26 years, people are finally going to open our door. We don't know what will happen to us, but we're ready to try to return to the world we left behind. The psychological evaluation conducted by Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a specialist in trauma and dissociative disorders, raised additional questions about the nature of David and Sarah's experience. If we accept that these individuals have somehow survived in an altered state for 26 years, Dr. Rodriguez reported, their mental health and cognitive function are remarkably preserved. The diary entries show consistent personality, memory, and emotional development that would be expected from people aging normally under extreme but non-abusive isolation. However, their description of their experience suggests a form of existence that's outside any known psychological or medical framework. They describe being conscious and aware, but unable to interact with normal reality until now. The investigation team faced an unprecedented situation. Credible evidence that two people had somehow survived for 26 years in a state that defied scientific explanation, and who were now potentially able to communicate with the outside world for the first time since their disappearance. But the question that haunted everyone involved in the investigation was whether David and Sarah Mitchell were still alive in any conventional sense, and if so, what would happen if attempts were made to remove them from room 217. The answer to that question would come sooner than anyone expected, in a manner that would challenge not only the investigators' understanding of the case, but their comprehension of the very nature of life, death, and reality itself. The decision to attempt direct communication with David and Sarah Mitchell was made after 3 days of heated debate among investigators, scientists, and hotel management. Dr. Rebecca Chen argued for a cautious approach, warning that any intervention could potentially harm the couple if they were existing in a delicate temporal equilibrium. Agent Sarah Williams advocated for immediate contact, reasoning that 26 years of isolation was already a form of harm that needed to be addressed. Detective Lieutenant Amanda Foster ultimately made the call that would change everything. We have two people who have been missing for 26 years, and we now have evidence that they're still alive and aware. Our obligation is to try to help them, regardless of how unusual their situation might be. The communication attempt was scheduled for October 20th, 2024, at exactly 3:30 p.m., the same time of day that David and Sarah had originally checked into room 217 26 years earlier. Dr. Thompson theorized that the temporal anomaly might be strongest at moments that corresponded to significant events in the couple's original timeline. The team assembled outside room 217 included Detective Foster, Agent Williams, Dr. Chen, Dr. Thompson, Hotel Manager Victoria Walsh, and Dr. Elena Rodriguez. They carried recording equipment, emergency medical supplies, and specialized instruments that Dr. Thompson hoped might help stabilize any temporal fluctuations that could occur during the contact attempt. Detective Foster knocked gently on the door and called out, "David! Sarah! This is Detective Foster with the Estes Park Police Department. We know you're in there and we want to help you. Can you hear us?" The response came immediately, and it chilled everyone present to the bone. "Detective Foster?" It was Sarah's voice, older and more mature than the recordings from 1998, but unmistakably hers. We can hear you. We've been waiting so long for someone to talk to us." "Sarah, this is incredible," Detective Foster replied, struggling to maintain professional composure. "Are you and David all right? Are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" We're not sure how to answer that," came David's voice through the door. "We're alive, but not in the way we used to be. We exist, but differently. We've been trying to understand what happened to us for 26 years. Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward to take the lead in the conversation. As a psychologist, she was trained to handle traumatic situations and help people process extraordinary experiences. "David and Sarah, this is Dr. Rodriguez. I'm here to help you work through whatever you've experienced. Can you tell us what you remember about the night you disappeared?" Sarah's voice carried the weight of decades of contemplation. "We went to bed on October 16th, 1998, just like any normal night of our honeymoon. We were so happy, so excited about our future together. When we woke up the next morning, something was wrong." David continued the story. "At first, we thought we were just disoriented from sleeping in a new place. But when we tried to leave the room for breakfast, we couldn't. Not because the door was locked, but because walking through the doorway didn't take us into the hallway." "What did it take you to?" Dr. Rodriguez asked. "Back into the room," Sarah replied. "Every exit, the door, the windows, even when we tried to break through the walls, led back to the same room. We were trapped in a space that was bigger on the inside than the outside, existing in a time that moved differently from the rest of the world." Dr. Thompson activated his recording equipment and began documenting what could be the first scientific record of a temporal anomaly involving human consciousness. "David, Sarah, this is Dr. Thompson. I'm a physicist, and I'm trying to understand the nature of what's happened to you. Have you noticed any patterns or changes in your environment over the years?" "The room provides for us," David answered. "We don't age at the normal rate. We don't need food or water in the usual way, though we feel hunger and thirst that the room somehow satisfies. We can observe the outside world, but we can't interact with it until now." "How do you observe the outside world?" Dr. Thompson pressed. Sarah explained, "The windows show us what's happening beyond the hotel, not just outside the building, but anywhere we think about. We watched our families grieve for us. We saw our friends get married, have children, grow old. We experienced 26 years of history, but as observers, not participants." The conversation continued for 2 hours, with the couple describing their experience in detail that was both scientifically fascinating and profoundly heartbreaking. They had been conscious and aware throughout their entire disappearance, aging slowly but mentally developing normally, isolated from the world they loved but forced to watch it continue without them. But it was Dr. Thompson's technical questions that led to the breakthrough that would explain everything. "David, when you describe moving through the room's exits and returning to the same space, that suggests a closed temporal loop. Have you noticed any specific times when the anomaly seems stronger or weaker?" "Yes," David replied immediately. "Every year on October 17th, the anniversary of our disappearance, everything becomes more intense. The boundaries between our reality and normal reality become thinner. That's when we can sometimes affect things in the outside world, move objects, leave messages, take photographs." Dr. Thompson's instruments were detecting massive fluctuations in the temporal field surrounding room 217. "David, I need you to think carefully about this next question. Do you remember anything unusual about the hotel room itself when you first checked in? Any strange feelings, odd sensations, or unusual phenomena?" There was a long pause before Sarah answered. "The fireplace. There was something different about the fireplace. When David lit it on our first night, the flames were wrong. They burned blue and green instead of normal colors, and they seemed to move in patterns that didn't match the wind or air currents. "Did you investigate the fireplace?" Dr. Thompson asked urgently. "Yes," David replied. "The next morning, October 16th, while Sarah was taking a bath, I examined the fireplace more closely. Behind the back wall, I found something that didn't belong there." "What did you find?" "A metal box, about the size of a briefcase, built into the wall behind the fireplace. It was covered with symbols that looked like a mixture of scientific equations and Native American pictographs. When I touched it, I felt an electric shock, and the symbols began to glow." Dr. Thompson immediately radioed for a team of archaeologists and experts in Native American history. His suspicion about the nature of the temporal anomaly was beginning to crystallize into a theory that could explain everything. "David, this is extremely important. Did you open the box?" "I tried to. That night, October 16th, after we made love and Sarah fell asleep, I went back to the fireplace and worked on opening the box. I finally got it open around midnight." "What was inside?" Sarah's voice joined David's in recounting the memory. "Light, pure white light that filled the entire room, and then nothing. The next thing we knew, we woke up the next morning and we were trapped." Dr. Thompson's theory was confirmed when the archaeological team arrived and conducted a thorough examination of the fireplace in room 217. Behind the back wall, exactly where David had described, they found a ceremonial container that appeared to be several hundred years old. Dr. Maria Yazzie, a specialist in southwestern Native American artifacts and a member of the Navajo Nation, identified the container immediately. "This is a sacred timekeeping vessel used by indigenous peoples of this region centuries before the hotel was built," Dr. Yazzie explained. "These artifacts were created by medicine men to preserve important moments or to protect sacred spaces from the passage of linear time." "How does it work?" Detective Foster asked. "According to oral traditions passed down through my people, these vessels contain concentrated temporal energy. When activated by someone with strong emotional connections to a place or moment, they can create pockets of suspended time where consciousness can exist outside the normal flow of reality." Dr. Yazzie examined the symbols on the container and translated their meaning. This particular vessel was created to preserve love and commitment that transcends death. It was probably placed in this location to protect the spiritual significance of indigenous marriage ceremonies that took place here generations before European settlement. "So, when David opened the container," Dr. Thompson began, "his love for Sarah and their commitment to each other activated the vessel's power," Dr. Yazzie concluded. "It preserved their honeymoon moment by trapping them in a temporal loop that would allow their love to exist forever, but at the cost of their normal lives." The solution to freeing David and Sarah required combining cutting-edge temporal physics with traditional Native American ceremonies. Dr. Thompson's equipment could potentially destabilize the temporal field, but only if the spiritual energy that had created it was properly addressed through indigenous protocols. Dr. Yazzie contacted tribal elders and obtained permission to perform a ceremony that would respectfully deactivate the timekeeping vessel while honoring its original sacred purpose. The liberation ceremony took place on October 25, 2024. Exactly 1 week after the initial contact with David and Sarah, the hotel management had evacuated the entire floor to ensure privacy and safety for the unprecedented event. Dr. Yazzie, accompanied by 2 tribal elders, conducted traditional prayers and rituals while Dr. Thompson monitored the temporal field with his instruments. Detective Foster and Agent Williams maintained security and documented everything for the official record. The couple inside room 217 participated in the ceremony by responding to questions about their willingness to leave their preserved moment and return to linear time, accepting that they would resume normal aging and face the reality of having lost 26 years of their lives. "We're ready," Sarah said through the door. "We've had 26 years to think about it, and we want to live real lives again, even if they're shorter and harder than what we've experienced here." The ceremony reached its climax when Dr. Yazzie spoke directly to the timekeeping vessel, acknowledging its sacred purpose while requesting that it release David and Sarah from their temporal preservation. At exactly 6:17 p.m., Dr. Thompson's instruments registered a massive temporal discharge from room 217. The reading showed reality restructuring itself as the pocket of suspended time collapsed and merged back into normal space-time. When the energy readings stabilized, Detective Foster slowly unlocked room 217 and opened the door. David and Sarah Mitchell stepped out of the room for the first time in 26 years. They appeared to be in their early 50s, aged appropriately for the time they had experienced, but compressed into a shorter period than normal linear time would have produced. Their clothes were the same ones they had been wearing on their honeymoon, but somehow adjusted to fit their older bodies. The reunion with their families was overwhelming and complex. Robert Mitchell, now 81, embraced his son, who was now older than Robert had been when David disappeared. Dr. James Patterson, Sarah's father, wept as he held his daughter, who was now nearly the same age as his wife Margaret. The psychological and social reintegration proved challenging, but ultimately successful. David and Sarah had observed 26 years of technological and social change, so they weren't completely unprepared for the modern world. However, they needed extensive counseling to process their unique experience and to rebuild their identities as people who had lived through decades outside normal time. David returned to work in the technology sector, where his unusual perspective on time and reality made him surprisingly innovative in developing software for temporal data analysis. Sarah resumed teaching, but specialized in helping students understand that time and reality were more flexible and precious than most people realized. Their marriage, rather than being weakened by their extraordinary experience, had been strengthened by 26 years of absolute commitment to each other in circumstances that would have destroyed most relationships. They purchased a small house in Estes Park, choosing to remain near the place where they had been lost and found. Every year on October 17th, they returned to the Stanley Hotel, not to room 217, which had been permanently sealed and converted into a small museum about temporal anomalies, but to the lobby where they renewed their wedding vows in recognition of their love that had literally transcended normal time. The case of David and Sarah Mitchell became a landmark study in multiple fields: temporal physics, indigenous spirituality, consciousness research, and the investigation of unexplained phenomena. Dr. Thompson published papers that revolutionized understanding of time's relationship to human consciousness. Dr. Yazzie worked with museums and universities to increase respect for indigenous knowledge about natural phenomena that Western science was only beginning to understand. Detective Foster received recognition for handling the most unusual missing persons case in law enforcement history. Her documentation of the investigation became required reading in police academies for courses on handling unexplained disappearances. The Stanley Hotel embraced its role in the story, creating educational exhibits about the intersection of science and spirituality, and about the importance of respecting indigenous sacred sites. Room 217's transformation into a museum attracted visitors from around the world who wanted to understand how love could be so powerful that it could stop time itself. But perhaps the most important legacy of David and Sarah's story was its demonstration that reality contained possibilities that challenged every assumption about the nature of existence, time, and human consciousness. Their honeymoon had lasted 26 years, but their marriage, tested by the most extraordinary circumstances imaginable, had emerged stronger than ever. They had proven that some commitments really could last forever, even when forever took forms that no one could have anticipated. In interviews years later, when asked if they regretted the 26 years they had lost, David and Sarah always gave the same answer. We didn't lose those years. We lived them differently than anyone else ever has, but we lived them together. We learned that love really can conquer time itself. The room that had once held one of Colorado's greatest mysteries had become a testament to the power of love to transcend any boundary, even the fundamental structure of space and time. And in the quiet moments of their life together in Estes Park, David and Sarah Mitchell continued to marvel at the fact that they had honeymoon memories that lasted not just days or weeks, but literally decades, a gift that no other couple in human history had ever received.